welcome to Deck Talk, episode 8. Today, in a slightly different take, I'm joined by two guests. One being Mr. Wamma. Hello.
Hello.
And the other one, coming all the way from America, you probably heard him on our one of our podcasts where we talked about UK Nationals. We have Matt. Hello, Matt.
Hello.
So, slight difference here. We have got someone who made a deck of note on, this is the deck that Wamma took and won Norwich Regional with. But we're going to have a bit of a discussion on Tyrell Rains as a whole, because it's kind of doing pretty well in the meta at the moment, having won Blackwater as well the weekend before.
Yes, I agree. This will be a round table of sorts.
The main question being, guys, because when Rains first got spoiled, Tyrell didn't jump out at me as that's the deck you need. That's the one. That's the combination. So why is it doing so well with Rains?
I mean, I think partly the answer is that it works just as well if you make it like fealty or whatever. But in my opinion, Rains in the general meta is a little bit more efficient than fealty at the moment. But I think if you wanted to take this deck and make it a fealty deck instead of a Rains deck, the change would literally be remove 5 scheme plots.
Yeah, that is fair.
So, also I haven't checked it. Oh yeah, it's below 15 neutrals. Yeah, just remove 5 scheme plots.
Don't do a Kevin now.
I think just sort of having a general Tyrell good stuff is good at the moment, and Rains is sort of slowly becoming a good stuff agenda as long as you have enough intrigue to be able to back it up. I think it's kind of like two separate things that have made Tyrell Rains good, which is Tyrell being good and Rains being good. And I guess as a third thing, Tyrell and Rains not being terrible together.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big ones, because we kind of saw it at Norwich, where I know it was a smaller regional, but the top 8 was 6 Rains decks?
Yes.
That's amazing.
With Targ, Night's Watch, Greyjoy and Tyrell, I want to say, being the representations.
And Lanny as well.
Oh, and Lanny. So you had 5 different houses all running Rains.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2 for Greyjoy, 1 for the other 4. And then there were 5 or 6 fealty decks in the field, and none of them made the cut. That might it's a small enough field that it's probably just a fluke that it was that decisive. But I think it's telling of the overall trend on it.
And I think that might be one of the big ones, especially at this point now. What's fealty really giving you over another ability, which, fealty is probably a small benefit some turns, but whereas Rains can have a massive impact when it actually goes off.
Yeah, I think it depends on the house, of course. Like, I know that Martell fealty, Baratheon fealty, Targaryen fealty, they all leverage fealty really well because they just are constantly using their loyal cards. Whereas Rains, you don't. If you're not playing lots of expensive loyal cards, then you can definitely have room to, make it shine.
Yeah,
I think that's a very good point. I mean, with the Tyrell deck, obviously you've got Marjorie and Renly and the odd 1 or 2 others in the character base, but otherwise, once you've got the Arbor out, really, there's no specific thing that you need to kneel your faction card for.
Yeah. And that's the thing, keeping it free. It's keeping the faction card nil free for other abilities. This is one of the problems I did find later on with fealty, before I think Rains hit, was there's a couple more faction card nil abilities coming in, so which then obviously means you start competing with what could be one of your econ benefits, and the reason you are taking fealty.
Yeah, and I mean we'll be seeing that even more next pack with Iron Bank coming out.
Oh, right, the faction nail. And you've also got Summer, Kings of Summer, as well as an option if you want to have a little of both. You want to have the faction nail and you want a little bit of economic benefit.
And I guess
that obviously has the problem of no winter plots, which
true.
I'd say Tyrell probably benefits most from the Summer at the moment, because obviously you do have the new vineyard, which you obviously have taken here.
Yes.
And the as we were talking about beforehand, you do have, I know it's only a one-off, but you do have the King's Renly's Host, which on a summer turn is a pretty brutal card.
Yeah. Yeah, they're like the Host is one of those cards that could probably be cut from the deck without it really changing too much, but it's just sort of nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
it has a few things I like at the moment, and we'll probably go into more general kind of Reigns talk in a second, but as this is up. But mostly no attachment is pretty crucial at the moment. And Intimidate with high strength is always good.
Yes.
The only issue obviously being Winter Plot to stop it from attacking, but unlike a lot of other summer cards, at least you can still defend with it, and you're not, it's not like Knight of Summer, which just loses all its benefits because there's a Winter Plot.
Yeah, like Robar Royce who kneels and whatnot. Yeah, it just becomes a defensive wall instead.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a small anti-synergy in this list between that and the first Snow of Winter, but the great thing about Reigns is you can turn out at the first Snow of Winter and then attack with it.
Yes. Yeah, no, definitely. And I played against Matt Such at Bristol in a Tyrell Rains off, and he had that host out, and that actually did make a massive difference in the mirror.
Yeah.
But obviously, so we've kind of generally talked about, obviously Reigns is good, Tyrell is really good at the moment. So I guess where do we start with kind of the build? What are the key cards that make this work?
Before we get too much into the key cards, one other thing I want to say on the Reigns versus Fealty thing, and you asking about the Tyrell, like how it synergizes with the agenda, because obviously this is a deck that I was a big fan of before we got the new econ locations, when Fealty was still a very good agenda. Not that it's bad now, but when it was still the primary agenda for every faction. And I think the reason that Tyrell can leverage Reigns quite well is the strength pumps.
Yes,
definitely.
Which obviously in this build I've gone with 6 strength pump events and the Pavilion and Crown of Golden Roses and Heartsbane. One of the changes that I've made, and perhaps a sign of how the synergy with the agenda is becoming less important, is I've gone with the Tinder Marge over Core Marge, which I'm sure we can go into a bit more detail later.
Yeah.
I just wanted to highlight that briefly, that's one of the angles that makes Tyrell particularly good with the agenda, is that you can go in for a challenge, and at the point when your opponent has to declare defenders, they may well not know whether you can win it by 5 or not.
That is one of the things I've loved to play, having played a lot of this this style deck, is kind of going, what's the strength? You go, well, it's strength 6 for now.
Yes.
And even if I actually have no way of buffing it, I always add in for now, because you just you're just sitting there with 1 or 2 gold, and it just starts playing, and sometimes people have to massively overcommit because they know potentially you can just say do a Growing Strong or Lord Renly's Ride. So I guess that's the same reason that kind of why Reigns is good. Obviously different for House, but Greyjoy, because obviously they have lots of stealth and lots of ways of bypassing characters with like the Raiding Longship. Yeah. And obviously that's not a house that you'd initially think Reigns is going to be good in, but actually it has been.
Yes. Like there's there's 2 angles to play off Reigns, and one of them is by having enough intrigue dominance that you can just win the intrigue challenges by 5. But then there's also using that challenge tricksiness.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got
definitely
Lannister
appreciate.
I know Lannister have Widow's Wail, but broadly they're more of a sort of a brute force way of triggering the agenda.
Yeah,
right. For the most part, barring ambush, Lannisters, their strength is on the board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only other thing they might have, is treachery to stop a strength buff or something, stopping them from, or a high garden in a challenge.
Yes.
But that's about their only real tricksiness. Otherwise, it's literally just, I got Tywin, he's strength 10. Here's Tyrion as well. Can you get to 8 or whatever that be 10 to stop me from triggering Reigns?
Yeah, or like I've got this non-kneeling 6 strength Cersei Lannister, and I get to do intrigue challenges, try and stop me winning both of them by 5.
Yeah, exactly. No, okay. Sorry, Matt, what were you going to say?
Oh, yes. From playing Reigns of Castamere, I definitely love the ability to, let's say my opponent blocks and he defends and I'm winning by 3. I love having that choice to decide, okay, do I want to dial this one up to 5 and trigger Reigns? How useful is that? I like how the flexibility of Tyrell lets you make those choices every time you do an intrigue challenge.
No, yeah, and it's great. Obviously, I'm going to go into the build, and actually, I think the one thing I want to start here, if it's all right, unless there's anything else to cover before we go into the build.
No, go for it.
No little birds and no appointeds.
Yeah, I can see the argument for them. I know, for example, the build that Darren won Blackwater with has an appointed in it. Ultimately, I figured they're just is enough intrigue icons already. I mean, looking at the icon spread chart, it's the most represented icon.
Yeah.
So it's really good if you can get that appointed on Randall or on Brienne and turn them into Tricons that can participate in lots of challenges and so on. But if you're just trying to have a balanced deck that can trigger the agenda if it needs to, having your Renly, your Marjorie, your Queen of Thorns, and then all of these lower cost intrigue icons that you can then boost up with the strength pumps is enough in practice for me.
Yeah, that does make sense, and sometimes having Renly with it is almost overkill. Obviously, the benefit being this is how my range deck is set up to try and get him into the challenges, because obviously then stand him and do the other challenges with him after you've, let's say, wildfired or something.
Yeah,
which
it feels almost like you need the appointed or Little Bird less for the agenda and more just for making your good characters be good more. And I almost would argue that it's better in a non-range list, because in a non-range list you're less likely to be flush with intrigue icons. And in that case, it's sort of pulling the double duty of making your Randall or Brienne better, and it's helping you keep a good icon spread. Whereas in here, I've already got a good icon spread, and putting more intrigue icons in it, if anything, can sort of upset the balance of it a bit.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that is a fair assessment. It's just something I wanted to cover, because you do see it in a lot of range decks do have those cards. So I guess the next thing I want to look at is your character count's a lot lower than, well, not a lot lower, it's in the same ballpark, but but I've seen most of the Tyrell Rains decks I've been seeing kind of 34, 35-ish characters. This is down to 31.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know what to say about that. It might just be a playstyle thing, in that I generally prefer to have non-characters stuck in my hand, and especially with a deck like this, you generally have enough draw that if you need to see characters, you can find them.
Yes.
Sorry.
I was going to say draw is obviously a massive strength for Tyrell, especially with Renly, the Pleasure Barges, and you've got the Mander in this list.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I've noticed here.
Sorry, Matt.
I've noticed here, James, that you're running a lot of one-ofs instead of you're not loading up on duplicates. Like, for example, what I think Ben and I have done when we've played around with Tyrell Rains. So it sounds like you're more reliant on Queen Marjorie to fish out one-ofs, and you're not as reliant on duplicates, which means that frees up some slots.
Yeah. I'd say that's probably fair. I mean, it's partly Marjorie and partly just the sheer quantity of draw.
Right.
Even running only 2 copies of Randall and Renly might seem crazy when they're essentially your win conditions in a way, but you will reliably see them.
This does almost remind me of my Tyrell Wolf deck I was using for a little bit about a month ago, and I just basically took every single Lord as a one-off, except I think for Bran might be the only one I had multiple copies of, because on the idea of if they're dead, oh well, I'll just use Marge, go and get another one.
Yeah. One other thing I wanted to say on the low character count is that while it is a touch low, obviously with 3 bodyguards, it kind of offsets it in a way that if we're talking strictly about having your characters attritioned away through claim and whatnot, it kind of, in a way, if you squint, has 34 characters.
Yeah, okay. I guess that is fair. And obviously you've got the 2 ladies in waiting to make some of your ladies more durable, and effectively makes them a much better card, effectively.
Yeah.
No, okay, that does make sense. So what are the key kind of characters in here that you kind of try to build around? Because obviously one of the difference I noticed, you've got Jega Nagar as an option.
Yeah. I think there's a few sort of spaces you've got free. Once you sort of, like, the core elements, I'd say, are Tyrell's big renowned characters. So, you've got your Renly, right. You've got your Randall, You've got your Marjorie, you've got your Knight of Flowers, you've got your Brienne. Those kind of go in, depending on which version of Marjorie you're running, those go in pretty much any Tyrell deck. I think once you've sort of got that core element to it, the other large characters you have, you can either go a bit lower on your curve, or you can sort of splash one-ofs of different types. Like, I know some people like to run Mance Raider as another big renown body. I went with Jack in here just because he's so much fun with Lord Renly's Ride and with Power Behind the Throne. Just getting to, even if you only sort of keep him on the table for 1 round, he can just be a 1-round wrecking machine.
Yeah. and that could be quite a critical one round as well, especially triggering him when you do the Rains trick. Oh, is it attacking alone, isn't it, actually? But you do something like a Filthy Accusation, kneel someone out, and then he can attack and get through guaranteed. Or you give people the option of, I'm going to do military with him. You have to overcommit, which then leaves your intrigue more vulnerable.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here's a question. If your key characters are Renly and Randall, and they're friends, why aren't you maxed out on 3 Renly, 3 Randall, 3 Brienne?
I could see an argument for, say, cutting Jaqen and King Renly's host, and maybe even like Queen of Thorns, and using those spaces to up the Renly, the Randall, the Brienne.
Yeah.
Personally, like I said before, I think just there's enough draw in the deck that you can find them if you need them, like more often than not, at least. And I wanted to reduce the number of potential dead draws later on, especially because quite often, like I found a very common pattern with the deck was I try to get out Marjorie and either Randall or Renly, and then put my opponent sort of, between a rock and a hard place, in that if they, try and clear my board, then Marjorie lets me get the other one out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're running 3 of both of them, then you're probably going to be sitting on useless copies of the other one in hand when you're just waiting to be able to spring them into play. And I find if you get Randall and Renly on the board at the same time, then quite often your opponent's fear of Marjorie will go away a bit, because they know that your main threats are already out. So sure, maybe you'll be able to upgrade your Paxter into a Knight of Flowers or whatever, but that's not as huge a deal as being able to suddenly unleash a 6 strength Tricon with Renown and Insight on the board.
No, that's
okay.
I think that's definitely fair, and it's if I've been in a situation the same where once you've kind of got the 3 big characters out, the fear of what else are you going to get. Whereas I can remember a couple of games at Bristol in particular where I just had Pax was my only lord that was on the board, but my opponent didn't with Marge. But my opponent then did not want to do any military attacks because he knew I'd just go unopposed, or I would just token oppose. Cool, I've now going to get one of my big characters on the board.
Yeah,
right.
I had that in the final at Norwich, where I had Tinder Marge with a Duke and Paxter, and my opponent had Drogo out round 1, or possibly even from setup. But he could do 2 militaries around, but he didn't really want to do any militaries around because he knew he was just going to be upgrading my board.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like James, that you're trying to use Queen Marjorie to get out, like Randall and Renly. Okay, so that sounds like that's your plan here. I mean, an alternate take on it, what Ben and I have done in the past is that surprise character is Varys. So I know at least what I'll try to do, and I'm guessing your deck tries to do, Ben, is we get out a bunch of lords, get a bunch of duplicates, and then that way we're ready for our reset, whether it's Varys or Valar Morghulis. And it's really nice to be able to pull Varys out, mid-turn from the deck.
I'm going to be honest. At the moment, I'm not actually running Valor in my deck, but Varys is that trigger sometimes where it does just make sense to. I need to get this board smaller. Varys into First Snow of Winter has been quite a common play I've done. So that basically I try and wipe their board as much as possible, then stop them from getting anything useful out. Normally I do that when I've got Renly out, so I can hopefully defend a few challenges if I need to as well. So my board state's not too threatened. The thing that's made that even better recently, and it's a card that I love that you got 3 of in here because I think it's absolutely fantastic, is the Old Town Informant. Because obviously on his first no turn, just being able to cut a chud out either as a military claim or to stop the threat of march from the turn afterwards is pretty good. Even if you don't use the bestow ability, I think this card is good. I mean, without the bestow, this card is just as good as a Burn Men, really.
Yeah, it's like Tyrell players are finally getting to experience what Lanny players got to experience last summer.
Except this is slightly better than a Burn Man. I mean, arguably maybe not because it can't stop a. There's a couple of characters this can't stop, like Asher, by just ambushing in and blocking. But I think in a lot of ways this card is just as good, and just being able to have that on a first no turn, even potentially as card draw, is pretty good.
Yeah, it sounds solid, and unfortunately, I haven't gotten to play around with the informers yet. So this is good news that we're seeing a nice ambush character to go along with this.
So
Yeah,
good.
and obviously it's worth pointing out she triggers not just off ambush, not just off the Queen of Thorns, but also off the Marjorie triggers, also off the Rains triggers.
Yeah, that's the
Right.
bonkers one. That's the really bonkers one.
For our audience, I looked this up. When you bring in a plot with Reigns of Castamere, that plot enters play, which means that it'll trigger the Old Town Informer.
Yeah. Other things as well, like Risen and not that anyone plays it, but Blood Magic Ritual. Oh no, sorry, it doesn't work.
Oh, okay.
It does. It doesn't work with other events.
Doesn't work with other events. Sorry, it does work with them because they actually enter play and actually attach to the characters. So it's just great, and obviously you don't have to trigger it if you like your hand. It's a reaction. It's up to you. But being able to filter your hand, and that's what this isn't. Draw, it's filter. Really, you're filtering through your deck. But that's still brilliant. I mean, I'd rather have a hard decision of which of these great cards do I have to discard, or my hand. This guy's dead. I can just get another card and get rid of him.
Yeah, and it allows you to run cards that, like, between the filter and the overall draw, it allows you to run cards that are sort of situationally useful. Like, I think that's one of the reasons why I like having the one of the Jackin and the one of King Renly's Host, is that they're very good cards, but in very specific matches. And also, it allows me to, instead of having to use Confiscation in the plot deck, it allows me to just run a couple of Routshirt's Raiders. And then, if I'm in a matchup where the opponent's throwing attachments around, then I've got the Raiders to be able to use. And if not, then I can chuck them for the Informer and replace them with something more worthwhile.
Yeah, no, I definitely see that, the logic behind that. The other advantage potentially, one game I saw, I can't remember what it was now, but someone had the Queen of Thorns in challenge, and then actually ambushed in the informant to just draw another card to find a better character to jump in. And actually, it works. They found a Randall, and this was post Valor as well. So it was just like, I'm gonna put this in now.
That's the sort of luck that makes you feel really clever, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
So what you're saying is that this informant is an engine.
Yeah.
Even.
Yeah, I underrated it. I won't. I'm happy to admit that. I thought it was, fine, like nothing special. Just kind of like a Burn Men, but with a broadly less useful icon. Occasionally you'll get to trigger and it's nice, good for combo decks. Was sort of my first flush impression of it. But it's very good. It helps this deck a lot.
Yeah. And so it's just draw. Draw is good. Yeah, I'm learning that one. It's
okay. So it sounds like where we are now is that we have a foundation of Queen Marjorie, and we're using Old Town Informers to draw into our draw in the cards we want, and we're using Queen Marjorie to search out the lords we want. So here's a question, James. I remember when Reigns of Castamere first came out, you really popularized using Lady Marjorie from the core set to really power Reigns, because you can turn winning by 2 into winning by 5, with an action. So why the switch to Queen Marjorie? I think that's a really good question to talk about, because Lady Marjorie just seems so useful.
Yeah, I think that if anyone wanted to run the core Marjorie, I probably wouldn't question it still. I think she is still wonderful for this deck, and I think she helps synergize with the agenda more than Queen Marjorie, even though obviously Queen Marjorie has an intrigue icon as well and 5 strength. Like, she's much more of a useful tool in the challenges themselves. But I think the reason I've made the switch here is partly just to help go with that, being able to trim down some of the spots on the Lords and Kings, go down to 2 Randall, 2 Renly. Also, just because it's moving away from the trickery in the character base and moving more towards the trickery in the event base. I think Lord Renly's Raid has helped a lot in that regard, in that if you keep a couple of gold back, your opponent is even more clueless about what strength you could put into the challenge than they were back around the time the agenda first came out.
Especially when you got one character in the challenge, because beforehand it was you got one character, you can boost him by 2 with Growing Strong. Now potentially you could boost it by 6.
Yeah. I've definitely gone into an intrigue challenge with just an Old Town Informer that has suddenly become 8 strength because Renly was on the top of my deb pile.
Excellent.
Yes, that's.
Okay.
I've seen Lanny Rose decks do that with the Hound, just using the Hound as a throwaway character to get him on top of the dead pile.
That's
Ooh.
silly in a good way.
Yeah. The other reason I think the move to the new Marge is because I think she's one of the best econ engines in the game.
Yes.
Okay.
You pay 4 gold for let's say Pax, and then he dies potentially, and then you get Randall, and then if he dies you get Renly, and then if he dies potentially you get the Knight of Flowers. Now you basically spent 4 gold and got 20 gold's worth of characters.
Okay.
Which means, although yes, Tyrell has got a stupid amount of money normally anyway, it just limits the damage that especially on a reset turn, just being able to get another character out, or if your opponent gets a very good combination of kill off, or your balls you just have bad draw. Having just 3 characters out, but knowing one of them dies and gets replaced immediately is not necessarily the end of the world. Whereas with Core Marge, it kind of could be.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. I think one of the strengths of the deck is being able to keep a constant pressure on the opponent, both in terms of what you can bring to challenges, but also in terms of being able to have a source of renown.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I think there's been a sort of a slow slide away in the overall meta, at least from what I've seen, away from it being a case of the idea of the game being to get 3 or 4 characters with renown on the table and then win challenges with them to accelerate from 5 or 6 power to 15 power in a couple of turns. I think Tyrell still very much plays in that way.
Okay.
And I think in order to offset the issue that the prevalence of resets has been caused, the fact that when you expect your opponent to have Valor Morgulis or Varys or something like that, some way of resetting all your power, having an engine to make it so that you can maintain some source of power grab constantly just helps put an extra line of pressure on your opponent. I've worded that terribly, but hopefully you get the point.
Okay. Well,
Yes, yes, we do.
6 gold, 5 strength, 2 icons of renown. That's solid.
The other thing I found as well is against crossing decks, it puts them into a real issue of what their challenge orders, because if they do military, again, you've got the option of potentially getting a better character. You put military first, trying to throw away, you can still potentially get a good character out of it. If they go intrigue first, you can potentially flip into Rains and hurt their deck. So it just, especially crossing, which I know isn't as popular as it used to be, but you still see some play. It just gives them a bit of a headache of challenge maps, because they don't want to give you an easy trigger on either Rains or Marge.
Yeah, from my experience when playing Tyrell Rains versus Tyrell Lord of the Crossing, that was popular for a good while. I found that Queen Marjorie and the Rains of Caspian Agenda itself were my edges in that mostly mirror match.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was going to say, but yeah, obviously, the recently Crossing has seen a big dip. I know it won the Cardiff Regional, but I don't know. Even in Dan's words, he was half drunk when he won that. He doesn't quite understand how it happened. So obviously it's not all just about big characters, because you've got big characters, you get no setup, and you can't have a game state anyway. You've got most of the lower cost characters as one-offs, including one of my personal favourites, Butterbumps.
Butterbumps, yeah. It's one of in every Tyrell deck.
He is, especially when you've got Renly out, he is phenomenal.
Yeah.
But the other ones, obviously you got one of, what's it? I always get a name wrong. Eleanor? Eleanor, yeah. So which is interesting, because is she the reason you've gone up to 10 limiteds, or was that just because you felt you needed 10 limiteds?
I already had the 10 limiteds. I actually went down from 11 limiteds when I built this deck. But that previous version was not good, which is why it's not published. But yeah, ultimately, she's just sort of, most of the time, she's blank. But when you get to play an extra limited early, it can just make a huge difference in letting you get your tempo out quickly.
Yeah.
Okay.
I found a particularly useful one, use pleasure barges.
Yes.
You're then more likely to see another limited, and even if it's just a case of going, right, I'm just going to dupe the arbor. That's not, as beforehand, you're like, well, I really want to do the Arbor because it's Greyjoy, or they might be playing Running Political Disaster. But I also need to get this other econ card out. Just being able to do both is quite headache free. And then worst case, use a 3 for free with 2 icons and the icon you want.
Yeah, I think between Eleanor and Knight of the Reach, you have 2 great choices for 3 for 3. So you can just use, here he is. You can use Knight of the Reach and Eleanor just to kind of even out your icon spread.
I was using Knight of the Reach in my build, but this is also because the Old Town Informant wasn't legal at that point.
Oh, right.
But he is brilliant for just kind of doing a military challenge because people want to over-defend it because normally you have a lady on the board.
Yeah.
And so people have sometimes people feel they have to over-defend this military, even if they've got chuds out, just to stop me from getting another power. But unfortunately, I think, and there's probably a conversation coming on later, I think he might start losing out because of slots. He's in that awkward cross. The other one, why we're just talking about the Knight of the Reach, I know he's not in your deck, but another knight we might as well mention at the same time.
Yes.
Is the Arbor Knight.
Yeah.
Now,
he seems perfect for Reigns of Castamere. Why is he not in your deck?
I know he's not why he's not in mine, but I'll let Wamma go first.
In here, he's not there for 2 reasons. The first one, and ultimately the most important one, is space.
Okay.
Just once you've... I think this is sort of part of the issue of the lower character count, is if I was running 34 characters, possibly those other 3 spots would just be Arbor Knights. Right. But because I've gone slightly heavier on the locations in particular, the spaces where he might have gone aren't there anymore. The other reason is with Targ everywhere, I'm not that thrilled about playing 1 strength characters.
And that's the reason I dropped him, was because of Blood of the Dragon turns. Losing characters at 1 strength is pretty crippling. Whereas worst case in his gold slot, you can go over to Courtesan of the Rose or the Old Town Informant, both of which are strength 2, and will survive, at least survive initially on the Blood of the Dragon turn.
Okay.
And that is a meta call. If Targ disappear from the meta, the Arbor Knight potentially comes better. Also, we get some more red wine characters with the right icons, he could potentially come better.
Okay.
But at the moment...
Okay. So it sounds like in a general sense, we just have what we've talked about here, just multiple choices for different cost slots. Like we have Knight of the Reach and Eleanor for a 3-cost slot. We have Arbor Knight and Old Town Informer and Butter Bumps and Curtis and the Rose all going into the 2-cost slot. So it's nice to have... It's nice that the card pool, for at least for Tyrell, has gotten to the point where we can make these choices.
I think the other issue is Tyrell has a lot of unique that are low cost uniques now that are actually pretty good. Like the other one being in the 2-cost slot, you've also got Sir Colin of Greenpool, who does suffer from Factory Strength 1 against Targ, but again he's a 1-of. But having that extra strength on a power challenge is always nice. Yeah,
he has no intrigue icon though.
No, but you win the game by getting 15 power, so power challenge is a hero important.
He's one of those cards where he's not important to the deck, but he's just nice.
Yeah.
And also, I love calling him Colon, which is a really stupid reason to include a card, but it does factor in for me.
That's okay. I mean, I like to include Knights of the Reach for the art alone.
It's gorgeous art. It is gorgeous art. I mean, just go back to Knight of the Reach. I think he's still got a place in Tyrell, but I think it's in the more rushy knight build that maybe banners Lynn Lannister or is bannered into Lannister.
I can see that.
I played against one the other day when I was doing, I think it was the crossing deck, and I lost in 2 turns, and he was one of the reasons.
Yeah, extra power. Makes sense.
I think one thing that is worth sort of pointing out about Tyrell generally is that a lot of their lower cost characters are all not doing the same thing, but sort of working towards the same overall goals. Yeah. Whereas in, I don't know, let's say Greyjoy as a faction, the choice between, am I playing more pillage-based stuff? Then I want the Black Winds crew. Am I playing, I don't know, like Drown God Recursion? Not that you are at the moment, but, whenever it eventually becomes a thing, then you're going to be playing your Drown Disciples and whatnot.
Yeah.
Am I going to be, like Priest of the Drown God? I don't know, that sort of thing. Am I playing just for location hate and unopposed? Or then I'm going to want Wendermere and the Shipwrights and so on. with Tyrell, it feels like all of the characters in those lower cost slots, maybe there's sort of slight variations on a theme, but they're all trying to do a very similar thing, and so it makes it that your lower cost slots aren't sort of differentiating the deck so much, but you can work it to personal preference a lot more, I think, than you can in a lot of the other factions. So when we're discussing all these different choices, I think pretty much all of them are acceptable choices in some variety for this type of a deck.
Okay.
Yeah. No,
so I think you could just easily make a version that didn't have. I mean, I think Butter Bumps you probably still include, but you could easily cut the Old Town Informers, Colin, even like the Lady in Waiting's Eleanor Tyrell, and put in the Arbonite, the Knight of the Reach, the Courtesans. However, like there's a lot more mix and match. I think.
I do wonder that might be better. They're probably better in a more rushy build. Probably Crossing though, maybe rather than Rains.
I think if you did put in all of the the Knight of the Reach and the Arbonite, say, then you probably maybe even want to make room for Tawny for the King or something like that.
Yeah.
Or heck, even put to the sword.
Yeah.
At that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's. I think Tyrell does fit into. I mean, the top end characters I think work in no matter what build you do, but the bottom end is more based around the two main themes, which are the knights or intrigue, strength. The way I've been building my decks anyway, which isn't necessarily the right answer. I should also point out.
Okay.
The other one I like is you got the Elena's Informant. Now, obviously, it's only a one of in the deck.
Yeah, I would have loved to have made room for a second one.
Okay.
Possibly, looking back at this list after the fact, possibly the Eleanor could become a second Eleanor's Informant, since they share a similar, same cost slot, same icon spread, only one strength different.
But a much more powerful ability.
Yeah. At the time I put in Eleanor as a matter of course, because I knew I was running a fair few limiteds, and then after the fact was like, well, I'd like an extra character. An Eleanor's Informant's never bad, and I don't want to up anything I've already got. So I might as well just put in a one-off just to, make people have to be on their toes the whole time.
The other option is potentially is to drop one Old Town Informant for another one, potentially as a possible.
But I love the Old Town Informant so much.
I do as well, but it's a possible. I'm not saying I would, or possibly Greenpool, but then Greenpool's also pretty good.
Yeah, there's a few options. I think with the Informants, I think 3 is overkill. Yeah. But I think 0, 1, or 2 are all valid numbers to include. And it ultimately just comes down to how many slots you have left at the end.
Now, the one thing we need to talk about now that the events have been spoilt is we don't have an image, unfortunately. But with the new event, does the do you run this in addition to the Informant?
Or you're talking about Lena's Machinations?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a tough one. The event is obviously very good, and obviously the reaction of having to win an intrigue by 5 is kind of laughable in a Rains deck.
Yeah.
So I think when that card comes out, it's a very valid consideration. And obviously with the Informant, the most common challenge that you choose is the power one, I find. Usually, unless you're trying to bait out defenders so that you can then go in for another intrigue and trigger Rains on the second challenge, or unless your opponent just happens to be up against it on the number of characters on the board and you're going to be able to, claim a good scalp if you do another military. I think most of the time when you're playing her to try to push through towards victory.
Right.
Usually by the time you've got 4 gold lying around,
yeah,
you're at that point in the game where you're trying to get to 15 rather than trying to set up to get to 15.
Right. Okay.
So in that way, you're not losing too much by changing to the event. And I think the event definitely also has a lot of value with the Old Town Informers, in that you can, if you don't have the gold or the characters on the board to do the power challenge, then you can just discard it for the Informer's trigger and then get it back when you trigger Rains.
Yeah, it definitely has a lot of work like that. I've seen similar plays with Dragon is No Slave and Plaza of Pride.
Yeah, it's the same principle, I think.
Yeah, you can
you can even discard the event and bring it back to your hand in the same reaction window.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is true. You can reveal a new plot with Rains, trigger the Informer off Rains, revealing a new plot to discard the event, and then because you've won an intrigue by 5 and you're still in that reaction window, pay a gold and get it straight back.
Yeah, that's,
And
that's pretty sick.
at that point, Old Town Informer is pay a gold to draw a card, which is not bad.
Yeah, well, 2 gold, because obviously you got to pay a gold to get the event back. But yeah,
Well,
still,
that's the gold that you pay.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I see what you're saying. Yeah, because you already paid the gold, obviously. So, yeah, that's pretty nasty. Yeah, I like that line of play.
So yeah, in short, I think it does have a space. I think if you did cut the informant for the event, you might then need to find a cut outside of the characters and put another character back in that spot. Just because I feel like going down to 30 characters might be a touch low.
Yeah,
yeah. I think
30 is really low
well.
outside of like Baratheon fealty heavy dominance. Yeah.
Yeah. So
you're already at the lower limit here. Yeah.
So any other characters we want to hit on that we haven't talked about? Obviously, Mance is one that obviously could go into the deck, but obviously you already talked about Jeganagar instead of.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's all the characters really. Anything else to add to characters before we move on?
Let's see. Oh, I noticed. How is Sir John Fossaway working for you?
He's good. I mean,
yeah.
With the 6 strength pumps and with the Renly's Pavilion and with Song of Summer in the plot deck, it's not difficult to have him have renown.
Now, you have got to be careful though. The amount of times I've flipped out of
Song of Summer in
renown, yeah. Just before I written, then gone, oh crap, that renown was going to help me win the game. Damn. Yeah, it is. I like him. He was, I think, a 2 of in my deck originally. He's now down to a 1 of though, because he's good, but he's not.
Yeah, I'm always nervous. I don't know if it's just first edition sensibilities, but unless a character is really important, I try to keep uniques to 1-ofs.
Yeah.
Just because I really hate the drawing a dead card. I mean, you could argue with the Old Town Informers that it's actually less bad here than it is in normal deck, but it's just my default deck building sensibilities that I don't want to have dead draws where possible.
Okay.
No, it's something I'm moving more towards. I say the example being the Tyrell Wolf deck is that was the one that really opened my eyes. That actually a lot of characters can be a 1-of. Now, obviously, that's because of Mars triggers. I just mean I could care less about the characters, but I can definitely see that sensibility now of now the pool's big enough, you don't necessarily need 3-ofs of all these characters anymore.
Okay.
So after you, Matt.
Oh yeah, we the last character I think we probably should talk about is Queen of Thorns.
I've not touched on her yet. Okay. The much maligned Queen of Thorns. What was she rated as the 2nd worst character out of 7 costs out of core?
Or behind Old Bear.
I thought it was behind Red Viper, but okay.
I mean, Old Bear should have been rated worst.
I always liked Viper, but I was always told he was too easy to control when I first got into the game. And obviously now there's a whole deck built around making him strength 100 and something.
I feel like this is a bit of a tangent, but I think the Viper's demonstrably better than the Queen of Thorns.
7 for 7 with 3 icons. Can't argue with that.
Yeah, I think he is as well personally, but yeah.
Viper has 2 more strength and an extra icon.
And potentially can get a silly amount of renown and win the game. Or power, sorry. But she is obviously card advantage because you can put your econ advantage anyway.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't really like her that much.
No.
Okay.
In past versions of the deck that I've built, I've run 0 copies of her.
Same here.
I ran 1 here just because I found that as much as I don't like her, my opponents tend to dislike her more.
Yeah, I think that's actually a fair comment. I know I've over defended when she's been in challenge before because I worry about what's in my opponent's hand.
Okay.
There's nothing. Getting in like an Alaman's informant, even just out for free and triggering an extra challenge can be quite nasty.
Yeah, you've definitely got some synergy here between First Snow, because then that loads up your hand with with extra characters to lay out. You've got the Old Town Informers because you can plop them down in the reaction window to winning. It also looks like your Old Town Informers can draw you into characters which you can then plop down with Queen of Thorns.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've got a lot of synergies here.
Because all the same reaction window, isn't it?
Yeah. And also, I noticed you have 3 pleasure barges, so that means you're drawing a lot of cards, and you're sacrificing some gold to get to those cards, which means that Queen of Thorns gets better as a way of playing those cards.
Yeah, that's all very true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like whenever I've lent too strongly on Queen of Thorns, I've run up against control decks that just take her intrigue icon or kneel her or blank her or treachery the reaction. Like there always seems to be something that stops her working.
But
I found that in a deck like this that, as you say, draws so much, usually making your opponent have to spend their tricks on her means they're not having to spend their tricks on something else.
I was just about to say the exact same thing. I'd rather they were doing treachery on that than, let's say, standing Randall.
Yeah, or on searching for a Lord or King with Marjorie.
Yeah.
Okay.
There becomes a point where rather than shying away from the powerful effects because of treachery and nightmares and the like, you just can sort of overflood with them. And it's like, say, well, you can deal with some of these, but you're not going to deal with all of them.
No, I think that's definitely, especially Tyrell now. They've got so many little tricks that treachery almost seems like trying to use a water pistol on a fire.
Yeah.
I think just they have say you've got Marge, you've got Randall, you've got you've got Renly's Pavilion, Highgarden, the Manda, all these the Queen of Thorns. These are so pleasure barge. These are so many triggers. Do you really want to be wasting your gold on or wasting your treachery on that? But then also you got the other logic is you got to use it on something.
Yeah, and if you do spend all your treacheries stopping all that and denying the tempo too much, then you've run out of treacheries to use when we just Varus.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's a fair shout. I think one of's probably about right in this deck because she has the right icon. She potentially is good money advantage, but at the same time, I have seen decks that just try to leverage her, and it just doesn't quite work. She's not that good a character.
Okay. Yeah, unless you're winning an intrigue icon with her and you have a good Tyrell character in hand, she's basically a blank 7-cost 5-strength icon.
Yeah.
So yeah, you have to either be willing to take the hit on that, or you have to be able to make her work.
Now, the interesting one's going to be when the new Queen of Thorns is out.
Oh, I love new Queen of Thorns.
I do as well. I'm also kind of hoping Dark Wings, Dark Words comes back at that point.
Well, that's going to be November, and we're going to get a zillion Tyrell cards all at once. And I bet you these Tyrell Rains decks are going to look very different by the time we come out the other end.
Probably. Okay, so on to the other one I want to touch on. I think plots are probably the most interesting one now because one of the things that always annoyed me with Reigns until recently is really the schemes were you took Filthy Accusation, you took Wildfire, you took Varys' Riddle, you took Power Behind the Throne, and then you kind of took one depending what your game plan was, which was
if you were Tyrell, you could take Pulling the Strings. If you were Lanny, you could take Wardens. If you were Martell, you could take Long Plan. Maybe instead of those, you take a Game of Thrones or Forgotten Plans.
Yeah, basically that was it. But now we're at a point where actually there's a few more coming in. So like Littlefinger's Meddling, which probably of the new event, you base it around the new event. That's probably not a bad option to get that out for free, basically. But the other one, but the main one is, and you've taken out Wildfire for this, is the Red Wedding.
Yeah, how's that worked for you?
I mean, this was sort of I made that change at the tournament just to test it. And
she's the alt art, admit it.
Sorry?
And she's the alt art from Euros.
Oh no, I used the regular one actually.
Oh, what?
He was that unprepared that he didn't even get his art correct.
I've got the deck to hand. Let me check. Yeah, no, I used the regular art.
Oh, Wamma, no.
But yeah, I did it mostly just to test it, and because I thought it would be fun to be able to scare the bejesus out of my opponents. There was one game where I wished it had been Wildfire. There was one game where I was glad it was Red Wedding. And in the other games, I wouldn't have flipped either of them. So further research needed, I think. But I figured that between other people's resets and the Valor in my own plot deck and Varys in the draw deck, that Wildfire was less useful than it is than it was when the agenda first came out. And that it's very rare that your opponent has more than 3 characters and there isn't a reset impending from one player or another anyway. So I thought I'd see if I could leverage the target kill instead, just to try to prize open game boards that have been locked down, rather than it being like, well, I've wildfired and now I've got Renly, Randall, and Marge, and you've got Tywin and Tyrion and Jaime or whatever. And you could argue that that's a poor choice on my part, in that obviously it's removing the lovely synergy between Wildfire and Tinder Marge.
Okay.
Yeah.
But beyond that loss, there isn't really that much that you lose from it. So I don't know if I'd recommend it, but it was fun to try.
My limited experience with the plot is I took it in the Night's Watch Winters Wildling deck.
Yeah, that's when I've seen it too.
And there was 2 games. I played Night's Watch, I played Martell, and had no lords, and it was a pointless plot.
Oh, okay.
And in one of the games, it cost me because the no claim stopped me from winning the game. If it had been any other plot, I'd have won.
Yeah, I think it should be confined to Rains decks.
Yeah.
Because you can control when it's revealed.
Yes. Normally when you're going second.
You never have to touch it. The at worst, you're getting an opportunity cost from.
Okay.
I guess actually at worst you turn it when you think you're going to be able to make it work, and then your opponent kills your lords and ladies. But assuming you're not an idiot, at worst it's just the opportunity cost of one of your 5 rain slots going away, and occasionally it can just win you the game from somewhere.
Now, the big one we should point out here is the ruling is you can't use it on the turn you flip it into it, on this event challenge flip into it, because this is when you win a challenge, you make a character. It's an interrupt. Obviously, you react with Rains, so that comes after the interrupt window.
Yes.
So
I think it's probably for the best. Like, I've heard people criticising that.
No,
but
I think it's good.
If it was just any time you win an intrigue by 5, you can kill a lord or lady without the opponent being able to do anything about it, I think that would be a little bit bit really, really good.
Yeah, I agree as well. I think it is much better the fact that you have to. You can do it on the other 2 challenges, potentially 3 challenges, because there are ways of getting more challenges with Tyrell. But I do think it's better on that first initial one, because otherwise, I think it would be too brutal. It's an interesting one, because I've quite enjoyed Wildfire, but at the same time, I can completely understand not wanting to trigger Wildfire at quite a few games.
Yeah, fortunately, we have a lot of good. We've received a few more good schemes to choose from. Here's a question: what about Wheels Within Wheels? Now that that's coming,
I'm torn on that plot a lot. In that I can't figure out how many events you need to run to make it worthwhile.
Okay.
So I'd be interested to hear what you think about that, Matt.
I think if nothing else, if you're not leveraging all 5 of your schemes every game, I think it's just good to have. You can just, sometimes it'll get you a card. That's great. Yeah.
Do we know what the reserve on that is? I feel like
That's
we
a
do.
good question, actually.
I think it's quite high, isn't it?
If it's 7, then that's pretty good.
If it's 7, it is 7. I've just looked it up.
Okay.
I can see there being an application just for if you need to turn into high reserve. If you've plotted political disaster or whatever, or even like a 6 reserve, if you've got 7 in hand, just being able to keep an extra card could be useful.
Oh yeah.
And obviously the versions that run Elena's Machinations.
Yeah.
There's the fun of being able to turn into wheels, find 2 events, take the one that isn't Machinations into hand, and then discard Machinations, and then pay a gold to get it back again straight away.
Yeah. 7 reserve is great. I noticed that your plot deck doesn't do this, but I know Ben and I, we've used Late Summer Feast, which only has 5 reserve. So when you're starting off with a 5 reserve plot, it's great to flip into a 7 reserve plot.
Yeah, and obviously Late Summer Feast is a good one to be able to turn out of generally.
Yeah, but mainly because they get to use the reaction once as long as you're going first.
Yeah. My opinion is that I get the logic of it in Reigns, but I just really hate that plot.
A lot of people, it seems to read Divisive Plot, because I actually think it's less bad than what's it? Trading. I would rather give my character. Well, it's actually yes and no. Because there was one game I was doing with Dan Kerr. I think it's the first ever deck talk, and we won. Yeah. He won the game because of this plot. Because his opponent won 2 challenges.
Let him find a put to the sword. Is that cool?
Yes, and that basically just wiped this guy's board just because of this plot. So, but it's the unknown. It's potential unknown. Is it better to give your opponent 3 gold, which means they could potentially get out a lot bigger characters? Or is it better to give them some
Exactly.
cards that might not be great, depending when they get them?
I think it really depends on the deck and the meta. Like I remember when I was building Tyrell Rains and really tweaking it for regionals a couple of months ago, I was really going back and forth between trading and Late Summer Feast. I found that it's my belief, at least, in a general sense for a Rains of Castamere deck, Late Summer Feast is probably what you're looking for, and here's why. You're putting that plot out there because you want to slam down a couple of big characters and then win an Intrigue challenge by 5 or more. Late Summer Feast is better for that, in my opinion, because if you were to play Trading with the Bentoji instead, you're giving your opponent 3 gold to stop you from being able to activate Reigns of Castamere. Whereas with Late Summer Feast, they don't get that 3 gold extra worth of characters to put down there and block your Intrigue challenge. Yeah.
I think that's all very fair. I think also when I first built this deck, like back when Reigns first came out, I was running trading because at that time, what trading said to your opponent was, I can put more characters down, and you could then Varus everything away.
Yeah.
Increasingly in the modern meta, giving someone 3 extra gold is saying, I can put down an extra limited location, or I can play Astapor and bestow it fully.
Oh god.
Or it's not saying to your opponent, I can put down an extra renown body that may or may not die in the future. It's saying I can put down something extra, like an extra little toy to help control the table. So I've gone off trading for that reason lately, but I still don't like Late Summer Feast.
Now, I would say I actually think the deck the Reigns deck this fits in best is Night's Watch Reigns, because you don't necessarily mind losing 3 challenges on the defense.
Oh, right.
Because obviously you're just trying to defend the wall. So your opponent doesn't necessarily get. So your opponent's less likely to get the card draw out of, especially as obviously Night's Watch. You think that's bad because my opponent's going to make me go first. Well, that's fine. Cool. Yeah, you kneel the Haunted Forest. I kill this Chud and you take 1 card out of my hand. Right now I go and do Reigns and do all my other triggers. Or the other one I've used it for is to just they did Intrigue first. I flipped into Game of Thrones, so they got 1 card draw, and then they couldn't do any more challenges anyway.
Okay.
But I think a lot of Reigns decks should look at it, but I do think it might depend on the Reigns deck. The main reason I took it was just to get the Arbor out.
Yes, that's another question. So your deck, James, how are you able to play the Arbor if you don't set it up? Because I'm not seeing a big gold plot.
Summer Harvest can be a good gold plot.
Okay.
Obviously, it depends on what your opponent's playing. But I found that I was consistently able to land it on, a 5 or 6 gold plot. Typically, like most common, I'd say Time of Plenty. It's generally, it's a very popular turn 1 or turn 2 plot, including for this deck. Yeah. When you've got 8 gold from Summer Harvest, that gives you plenty enough to play the Arbor. Also, sort of having the extra economy of the vineyards means that if you've got a vineyard out instead of the Arbor, say, then it's less of a tempo hit to play the Arbor on a 5 or 6 gold plot like Song of Summer or Time of Plenty, because you're already getting the extra 2 gold from the vineyard, which just makes it easier to be able to afford the tempo hit of paying 4 for the Arbor.
How have you found the vineyards? I've not tried them yet.
This is the first deck I've tried them in, and they were good. They weren't amazing, probably because I accidentally took Counting Coppers instead of Close Call when I was building the deck the night before. So I only had 3 summer plots instead of 4, which was not intentional. But they're fine. Usually the rounds where summer plots are played either by you or by your opponent are like the first 2 or 3 rounds, and that's generally the rounds where you won't have found your Arbor yet, if there is such a round. Like normally you've got the Arbor on the board, I'd say sort of like by round 2 at the latest. And at that point, it doesn't matter so much that the vineyards are only giving you 1 gold.
Right.
But what they're very good at is providing a stopgap to get the Arbor on the table.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess the other thing as well is because there is talk of potentially I don't know if it's been spoiled yet, but the other way around for Stark. There's more people run summer plots. Has it been spoiled? I think it's semi-spoiled. I want to say.
I don't know if it's been spoiled, but I've definitely heard that rumor.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, people tend to run summer plots anyway. Summer plots, probably, if you're going to take summer, winter, summer, and take out Kings of Summer, Kings of Winter, summer plots are just more common than winter plots, as it is.
Yeah.
So, it's essentially, you're going to be triggering it when it's not your turn.
Yeah, I think that's because the winter plots tend to almost all be destructive. Like, there's one or two exceptions, like Winter Festival, but for the most part, if you're playing a winter plot, you're trying to be destructive towards your opponent. But there's also several other plots that allow you to be destructive towards your opponent.
Yeah.
Whereas the summer plots tend to be more constructive, and there aren't that many good. Like, if we're listing common opening plots, you've got, trading with the Pentoshi Noble Cause, but then after that, you're looking at Time of Plenty, Summer Harvest, Late Summer Feast, Calm over Westeros.
Barring the gates.
Barring the gates, okay, yeah. Had to throw a curveball in there.
I love Barring the Gates. The other one, the other. I mean, this is really deck specific. Normie Greyjoy Winter, but obviously would be, or Greyjoy wants to use some winter plots, would be Snowed Under. If you have initiative boost.
Yeah.
Which is something I've leveraged.
You do get some other plots, but I think more broadly,
no, you are right.
People run summer just if you're looking for. Well, I've got these 4 or 5 plots that are the core of my plot deck. Now I need a couple to round it out to give myself plots that are never bad to reveal, that just let me, get on with playing the game if I'm not on a specific turn where I need to play one of these other plots. You tend to gravitate towards summer plots, I find.
I'm mostly just being facetious, but yes, you are right. No, yeah, you're
That's
right.
true.
And
Summer plots are generally useful.
I think this is good econ. We're going to compare all of the 2-for-2s nil ones. This is probably kind of the middle of the road one we've had so far, where it's pretty good.
I find it's possibly the worst. But
I believe it's the worst.
I'm higher on the Greyjoy one than most people.
I think the Greyjoy. Oh, maybe actually, yeah, probably is one of the worst. I think the Greyjoy one's worse though.
You've got Targ is better.
Yeah.
Martell is better. Night's Watch is better in my opinion. And then we haven't got the Barrister and Lanny ones yet. And the Greyjoy one, you say is worse, I say is better. So either way, we're looking at somewhere between 3rd and 5th out of 5.
If the rumors of the Stark one's true, I think that's potentially worse.
I think certainly the Stark one, if the rumors are true, is less generally good. Like, that's going in a deck.
It does mean Stark Winter might become a thing, but we are probably moving away from, because I do think Stark needs to go away from fealty at some point.
I think between Duel and then Valar Harris in the next, the first pack of the next cycle, I think Stark can't afford to play the 6-cost Renowned Bodies game that it's been playing since its box. Well, I think it needs to find a new way of playing the game, and possibly the limited will point them in that direction. I think.
I also think this deck will also suffer from the same problem.
I'd say certainly.
No, I disagree. You have Queen Marge, and in fact, this deck could even play Valar Harris because you have Queen Marjorie. You can just fish out the Lord that you shuffled back in.
Yeah, but you can fish out the you shuffle back in, but you can't. You can't leverage the effect the same way you can leverage Valor or Wildfire. Yeah, because you can't trigger Marge.
Yeah, that's true.
I think that's the issue because they're not killed; they're just discarded or put back into your deck. I think that's the reason why this deck will suffer a bit from that. If it becomes a thing, I'm 2 minds whether it will be a thing or not. I think we need to see in a couple of months after it's released.
We're gonna have the Tyrell box before Valar Harris comes out, so a lot of things are gonna change.
Yeah,
that's true.
Now the other part I really want to talk about in here, because I think assume this is a meta call, but is political disaster.
Yes,
this is what I'd like to talk about. Like, we can go into more detail on political disaster specifically.
Yeah,
but,
I agree. I think it deserves it.
In my opinion, one of the main strengths of the deck is what I like to think of as sort of like the. I don't have a fancy name for it. I should have thought of one before coming on to it. But the holy trinity of plot cards of political disaster, Valar Morghulis, and the first Snow of Winter. That they each punish your opponent for overextending in a different direction.
Yeah.
And
the Wamma trio
is
the Wamma Whammy.
The Wamma Whammy.
If we like.
Quick, coin it. Get t-shirts made.
But yeah, let me try saying that again. Having the arbor on the table makes all three of those plots really, really potent.
Yeah.
And it basically says to your opponent, are you playing a game with lots of locations? Well, then I'm going to political disaster you. And because I've got the arbor as one of my 2 locations, possibly 3 if I've duped the arbor, then my location base is going to be stronger than yours. First Snow says, you're overextending on chuds? Well, I'm going to bounce all yours back. I'm going to have the extra economy boost from the arbor. And then I'm going to be able to jump stuff in and make, do better with the smaller boards. And then you've got Valar Morghulis, which is saying, you're overextending on bigs. Well, then I'm going to just clear the board. The arbor's going to give me enough gold to, push the advantage anyway.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to be able to reflood better than you.
I guess
it's very difficult to play against the deck, because the moment that you push too far in any one of those directions, then the deck can just reset you. And if you try and balance all 3 and don't push in any of the directions, then you've got the 6 strength pump events and the big characters on the table that can just let you dominate the challenges phase.
The big question, I guess, here then from this is how much does this to counter the builders deck that you took? Because you got to expect that now at a regional or higher.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obviously good against the builders deck, and that definitely was a consideration when I included it. But the more I've played with it, the more I've found that I think even if that builders deck didn't exist, I still think it would make the plot deck.
Right.
Okay.
Like in the regional in Norwich, across 8 rounds, there were only 2 rounds where it wasn't highly effective for me.
Okay.
I think a big part of that is that because the meta has moved towards the 2-cost limited locations a lot, it's made people push the gold on their plots down slightly, because they feel like the economy that their location base provides is more reliable than it used to be.
Oh, and that reminds me, and also with Great Hall replacing Kings Road in a lot of cases, that means people they have more locations out.
Yeah,
over time.
Exactly.
That's been a big one. I've noticed that a lot.
Even if you aren't running any effect locations, just forcing you to go down to 2 limiteds can quite often be a major thorn in opponents' sides. I found that against Alex at Norwich. He was playing Martell Fealty, and he had out all 3 Dornish fiefdoms, 2 Blood Orange Groves, and Gaston Grey. And I political disaster him, and it's like, well, he's just got some economy in Gaston. But it's either he loses Gaston and 4 golds worth of economy, or he loses 6 golds worth of economy.
Yeah, it's a big hit.
It's and it's one of the things I noticed. It's not quite the same, but Dan Kay, I think, was playing Kev at the top 8 at Cardiff, and he used We Do Not Sow, and there was I can't remember what it was, there was a better target, but he decided to use it on the fiefdom.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a bit of a waste at the time, but actually it then completely destroyed Kev's cost curve. And obviously, it's a similar effect, and I agree. Especially a lot of Martell decks, they need a lot of money to get Ariane out every turn, and to play their events, and to reoccur their events, and XYZ. That if you can starve them of money, they're actually not in a great situation.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was in the final at Norwich against Sweeney. He had out a fully bestowed Astapor, a Plaza of Pride, a Great Hall, I think, then a Rose Road and a Slavers Bay Port or something like that.
Okay.
And because he just the previous round spent 5 gold on Astapor, he felt like he had to keep that. He chose to keep the Plaza of Pride, which I think we agreed afterwards was probably a mistake, but it meant that he nuked his entire econ base just from this one plot, and that was sort of the finishing blow in terms of him having a chance of getting back into that game.
Did anyone record that, by the way?
The White Walkers did.
Awesome. Look for space.
So here's a question. Do you tend to set up for political disaster? Like, do you prioritize looking for a duplicate of the arbor?
Sometimes. It depends partly on what locations I've got out already.
Okay.
If I've already gone quite wide, then maybe I'll try to make sure I get the other. Otherwise, I'm not really that fussed. even if I'm ended up having to chuck like 3 or 4 locations and the Arbor's not duped, and I've only got 2 locations, the Arbor and something else is still certainly going to be better than whatever they've got.
The other question here then, because going on with that, obviously you've got a lot of one of locations. You know, you've got one of the High Guard and one of Rennie's Pavilion, one of the Manda. With Political Disaster, obviously, that doesn't necessarily synergise as well. Obviously, I know you can always say, well, I know I'm going to play out Political Disaster, so I wait till the turn I've played it. But did you find find that hurt you, or was it, as I was literally saying, just having up the Manda and the Arbor was enough to warrant it?
Yeah, like I think if I were to take the deck to another tournament, I would cut the Manda and put in either a second High Garden or a second Pavilion, precisely for that reason. But broadly, it just kind of doesn't matter. Like, occasionally you lose one of your one-off good effect locations, or you know your economy takes a bit of a pounding, but you're still coming out of it better than your opponent is, regardless. And because you know when you want a Political Disaster, you can, as you say, just hold back those locations and play them out afterwards.
Because I had a similar conversation with Ryan with his Barra Kraken deck that obviously he did pretty well at 2 regionals in a row, and effectively Blackwater. And he said, obviously, I said, are you worried about it? He went, well, I can always just hold them back. And obviously he has less control over that if he thinks it's coming. Obviously, normally seeing a couple of decks running it anyway. If you're playing against Night's Watch, they're probably not running Political Disaster. You'd probably be safe. But it's definitely something that I worry about at the moment. I think it's a really good metacal, and especially I think when Tyrell get their new econ in the big box, the 2 for 2, the Red Wine Straits.
That's right.
Political Disaster, having that and the Arbor left, even if you have a Pleasure Barge or 2, is not the end of the world.
Yeah,
5 gold a turn on 2 locations. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously both being unique, you can duplicate either one of them.
Yes.
And
yes, that's true.
keep more around.
That's true. This is a case where duping that Arbor is very important.
So can I dupe on setup though?
Let me check.
What if I start Helen? Can I do it then?
Yeah. Oh, I saw that. I saw someone post that the other day. That made me laugh. Talk about the econ obviously quickly. So why 10? Because obviously 9 is normally considered the norm. I'm not criticising 10. I'm just wanting to know how you got to 10.
It's not going to be a satisfactory answer. I'll warn you in advance.
Okay,
good. If it is what I think it is, I am satisfied.
Okay, almost certainly is not. It's that I throwing together a list without paying attention to cost curves and limiteds and so on of Bristol a couple of weekends before, and in that one I was running very, very heavily on big characters. I had 3 Queen Thorns, 2 Renly's Host, 3 Renly, 3 Randall, 3 Marjorie, 2 Brienne, 2 Knight of Flowers, something like that, and had 11 limiteds in there, and it was a very, very swingy deck. Obviously, sometimes you see the pieces you need to be able to afford what you need. Sometimes you don't see enough econ and you get all these bigs stuck in your hand. Sometimes you just see all your econ and it's worthless.
That makes Tagore's comment at Cardiff make a lot more sense about my deck.
What was that?
So when we made the cuts and we're kind of looking through the decks, and Tagore kind of came over and said, "Yeah, your deck just seems a bit more cost curve effective than Wamma's deck," and obviously I hadn't seen your deck at that point.
Yeah, my list was not good. Looking back, it's kind of a miracle that I went 4-2 with it. It came about more from taking moderation from that list rather than like feeling like 10 was the right call here. It's just, well, it's not the 11 that I had before.
Okay.
I think I'm happy with it being 10 though. Like, it didn't feel like, just because you've got so much draw and you've got the informers that if you're seeing too many limited, you can always just chuck one. It's less bad to have that many, I think.
I also my thought was that if you have 3 pleasure.
Matt?
Okay.
Have we lost Matt?
I'm sure what Matt was going to say is that pleasure barge is an economic boon and that you should therefore cut to 0 limited. Not my words. I'm sure that's what people say.
I'm sure it was something like that.
Yeah.
So trying to carry on, I guess. Yeah, I think he was basically just saying, was it because of the pleasure barges taking off your gold? Was the reason for? I would assume that's a safe bet to assume he was saying. So sorry for the technical difficulties here, you guys. Yeah, and I think that's potentially a the logic. I assumed it was that, and obviously that's not to say that 10 is crazy. You know, it's just like some people take 9. It's not. Sorry, 8. Sorry, it's not a crazy to go one up or one lower.
Yeah, I've always gone with the logic of if you've got enough draw that you're not just going to be constantly frustrated at top decking limiteds. I'd rather make sure that I see the economy early game and then worry about having too much of it later, rather than not see enough of it early game.
Yeah, and unless pillage starts making its way into the meta, I don't think having too much gold is ever a problem.
Yeah,
and that's not making its way back into the meta anytime soon. Just quick to round off the plots then. Obviously, pulling the strings. Now, this one I took out. How did you find it?
Good. Ultimately, at the moment, we're in a counting coppers is everywhere kind of a meta.
Yeah.
And so I don't think you can have too many copy plots, because both Varys' Riddle and pulling the strings, the vast majority of the time for me, red when revealed, draw 3 cards.
Yeah, exactly for me. There's once or twice I think I used a Valor or a Marched, but generally speaking, it was the same. I was using it to draw cards.
Yeah, I got to March Alex's duped, bestowed Ricasso in one game.
Oh, nice.
Which was nice and good retribution, because he'd opened Marched up to punish me for only setting up Renly. Randall. So it was nice. How do you like it? But yeah, broadly, like it's got some extra application, but for the most part, it's just when revealed, copy counting coppers.
Yeah. And whereas this, obviously, then next turn you go in again and copy counting coppers again, potentially. So, yeah, I've started liking it more, because I think Alex Hines was talking about the fact that if this is your 7th plot, you actually still can use the 6 used plots.
Yes, they don't go back to your plot deck until after when revealed.
Yeah, so that made it a bit better, because and also means I misused it once or twice. Otherwise, obviously, this is pretty sound. Song of Summer helps you trigger Rains for 1 turn, and it's just a generally good plot, and obviously triggers off being summer. You said counting coppers would be close call now?
Yeah, at the risk of upsetting Joe Mirando, that is the way around that I'd go with it. I think just because with the 3 Pleasure Barge and with the 3 Altana Informer and with Renly and with Butterbumps and with 2 different plots that can copy the opponent's counting coppers, you don't need to trigger it yourself ever, really. And I think with Marge, I think being able to move a Renly or a Randall that gets early put in the dead pile out of the dead pile has real genuine value. It's not like, I feel like a lot of the time people play close call as like a safety net, and then in practice it's just a 5 gold plot that lets you draw 3 cards and doesn't really do anything.
That's been my experience quite often, is that you just end up going, okay, I'm going to put this character back, then actually
I put Drogo back. I'm not going to see him again, but it's nice to know that if I happen to, then I've got him there. And I think people misuse close call a lot in that regard, but I think with Marjorie, there is genuine value in being able to say, well, one of my Randalls is dead, but even though I've only got 1 left in the rest of the deck, I still have a reasonable chance of finding him, because all I need to do is kill a king or a lord and I can go and fetch him.
That's fair.
So I think that possibly should be close call, and obviously that also makes the Vineyards better, makes King Renly's host better.
The other one means you can always potentially get Marge back, and you are likely to see another Marge if something goes wrong at the beginning of the game. I mean, that's why I was running Ghost to Harrenhal instead.
Yeah, I was running Ghost of Harrenhal in the version I took to Bristol. In the end, I decided to go close call and then instead accidentally counting coppers, just because I was trying the Vineyards out and I wanted to have an extra summer plot in there. But I think Ghosts or close call, it can be much of a muchness to an extent.
Yeah, no, I think that is. I think that makes sense. So the problem obviously I had with Ghost of Harrenhal was then trying desperately not to lose that military. trying to make sure nothing else got in the dead pile so I could bring it back.
There's nothing more annoying than your Renly Baratheon being covered up by a garden caretaker. God damn it.
Yeah, I got to be honest, on a stream the other day, I completely forgot something else had died on a pig Ghost of Harrenhal, thinking I was going to get my Renly back. It was pretty disappointed when I was like, I got Butterbumps back. He's good. He's good. He's not quite, Going through the other plots, I think we've covered most of them. Most of them are pretty standard these days, and you know what you're kind of running. So Wamma, with the event package, I think you've kind of covered it already, but obviously the 6 strength buffs, I assume that's just to give your opponent headaches / make sure you get Rains off?
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things. Firstly, in the current, when you try and win by 5, you want to be able to push, you want to be able to push your strength up where possible. I think in a targ heavy meta, strength pump events are great. I think in matchups where it's all about challenge math and being able to win those key power challenges, especially late in the game when you've got renowned characters on the table and you're trying to push towards 15, I think anything that can give you a surprise edge in being able to win a challenge is really important. Also, my preferred style for building event bases is that I prefer to build as few events as possible in as large a quantity as possible.
To make it more consistent.
Yeah, exactly. It's like there definitely is an argument for playing lots of different events in small quantities so that your opponent doesn't get a good grasp on what your deck is trying to do. My personal preference is to make sure that I have a good grasp on what my deck is trying to do.
That's fair.
I'd rather my deck performed consistently from game to game. And so, where possible, I try to run 3 of or 2 of rather than 1 of. So I proportioned that there was going to be about 8 slots for events. It's like, well, if I'm going to do that, for the point of the deck, I need to run the strength boosting ones, so 3 of each of those, and then I've got 2 slots left. I could try being a bit tricksy, running one of the more interesting events like Offer of a Peach. I'm a big fan of Offer of a Peach in this kind of build, being able to win on defense. And, there'll be other options going forward, like Elena's Machinations. And I think if you're running the Littlefingers Meddling build, then being able to use Elena's Cunning also has a lot of value. But at the end of the day, if in doubt, it's boring, but Nightmares is the best blanking spell in the game.
Yep, that is fair. Any reason that you haven't got Tears in, being that you're trying to win Intrigue?
Ultimately, I had it in the Bristol version, and it sat in my hand useless in almost every single game. I think people are broadly adjusting to it. I think it has a lot more value in decks where you're trying to reduce to 0 on your opponent, where you obviously you'd like to get a Greg or Clegane or whatever, but you're happy enough just to get anything because it reduces the number of characters they're playing. This deck isn't really interested in reducing the opponent to 0 characters. It's more interested in staying on top of the opponent enough that you can win your challenges, get your renown, get your power claim off, that sort of thing.
I guess also if you look at you look at the meta as well. You've got Lanny, lots of intrigue icons. Tyrell, especially the all game range spells, lots of intrigue icons. Greyjoy, lots of saves. Targ, a fair number of intrigue icons and also ways of getting the characters back. So if you kill a dragon, potentially just get it back anyway. And then you've got what's the other one? Oh, Stark, Bran. Don't really care necessarily. So there's a lot of characters. There's a lot of or they just trigger Winterfell when you do on your Reigns and your intrigue anyway, or Cat.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of good counters at the moment.
Yeah, there's some times when you'd want a Tears, but more often than not, you'd rather have stuff that's trying to help you in this kind of deck and leave the destructive elements to your plots. What's the point in tearsing this guy when you're just going to Valor in a moment anyway? Or when you're going to first Snow and then you don't care if they've still got that guy that you might have tearsed because you've kept more characters than them and you're just going to dominate the challenges phase anyway. And if they do have a particularly annoying character, you can always, use Jaqen or even the Red Wedding and just try and do spot removal that way.
Yeah, I guess that will make sense. There's 2 other events I was thinking about. So one of them is the good old Handy J.
Yeah.
Which is obviously quite popular at the moment. Any reason not for those, or is it?
That's a playstyle thing more than anything. I think I don't like having to save gold that I don't know what I'm doing with it.
Okay, so yeah, especially if you go first, I guess I've got to say 2 gold in case I've got to put to the sword. I don't have to put to the sword. I've wasted my gold.
Yeah, like I think if there is room in a deck, I'll try and slot in one or two. But most of the time, I'd rather create problems for my opponent than try and deal with the ones that they're creating. But that is definitely a playstyle thing. I know some people would much rather like sort of establish what their game plan is and then fill out the rest of their deck with answers to what their opponent can do. I prefer to fill it out with just stuff to annoy my opponent or give me small edges.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. The other one is because of all the. I only thought about it because of all the one-off locations, but is probably guess what it is there from there. So support of the people.
Yeah, I do like support the people. I could definitely see an argument for it. In this case, it's just space.
Yeah, yeah, because I thought maybe I mean, obviously I haven't got any dupes or any of them, but maybe you dropped one location for support of the people. Effectively, the same job. But yeah, that's
Go down to 9 limiteds for it, maybe.
Don't be daft. I guess the main thing to talk about there. So, what is Rains of Castum? So, Tyrell in particular, Rains of Castum, his biggest weakness.
I found it can be very tough if you're up against a Greyjoy that hits hard early. Weirdly, given how the deck is, in my opinion, full of good cards, it's strangely reliant on the Arbor, and it still suffers as much as any Tyrell suffers if the Arbor gets discarded from play and then you're run in on the opponent's side. That's not like an auto loss, but it's pretty damn close. Yeah. Otherwise, this is going to sound really stupid, but I don't know if it has many obvious weaknesses. It's very much a deck that is relatively tough to play well. I think there's a lot of sometimes it's just autopilot, especially if you get Randall out early and it's just I'm going to slap a crown of golden roses on Randall. I've got loads of cards. I've got loads of money. Boom, boom, boom. I'm winning all the challenges, getting all the renown. It can play out easily, but I think against a deck that has the ability to sort of play its own game, maybe it's, can get a milk on Randall or, can discard your attachments, whatever. It's not got that many ways of just steamrolling opponents. You have to get in a lot of reps with it, I think, to be able to play it well.
No, you definitely need to. I definitely find you need to know when to trigger Rains, because there's not always let's just trigger Rains because I've won an intrigue. Actually, sometimes I've done it where I've gone in to look like I'm trying to trigger Rains, and actually, there's not actually anything I really want to flip into. I'm just trying to do it to make my opponent over defend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't really like giving that as a weakness because it makes it sound really arrogant that I won with it.
No, that's right. I do worry a little bit about Martell at the moment because Martell's coming back in to the meta.
Martell is one of the tougher matches, I think, just because they have that ability to control your characters in a way that other factions can struggle with.
The other one that was pretty much the only loss I was annoyed about, which is going to sound a bit arrogant, from Bristol, was against Stark, because I didn't have any Catelyn. He got Catelyn from the setup, and I really needed to get to my wildfire, and I just was not able to because of Cat. So I ended up actually putting 2 Wilding Scouts in the deck after that to give me some form of stealth.
Well, to be fair, in your version, you're not running Valor, are you?
No, and that is something I am now thinking I'm going to flip it. I'm going to use instead, because I use First Snow instead. And in pretty much every other game, First Snow did the job. That one game, it didn't.
Yeah. Of course, the other way you can deal with Caitlyn is the Lord Renly's Rides, being able to give Intimidate on a military challenge and just kneel her that way before your intrigue.
That's a fair point. But obviously, again, and the other one is Winterfell, because except for First Snow, there's not any other winter plots, is there?
Yeah. Yeah, I remember I had this same debate with myself around the time of Starlek last year, and in the end I just sort of decided if I can't turn into, if I don't get to trigger Rains all game against Stark, then that's not the end of the world, it's just annoying.
Yeah.
It makes the deck slightly less efficient if you're effectively playing it no agenda, but it's not a deck that needs Rains in order to work, it's just a deck that benefits when it can use Rains.
No, I think that's definitely. I think that's definitely a fair assessment. And obviously, you've also got the King Renly's Host, so you've also got Intimidate to potentially get Cat down as well.
Yeah,
So there is Intimidate there from this. Sorry, not obviously in addition to the other Intimidate or Nightmares. So okay, well, obviously unfortunately we've lost Matt, but thanks to Matt for coming by. Wamma, thank you for spending your time talking about this deck. I think just closing thoughts is if you're going to a big tournament, this is something you need to consider as a deck you're going to face.
Yeah.
It does seem pretty good right now. I think there's an argument it's up there as one of the top kind of 3 decks in the game, at least till the next pack comes out.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think what the main strength it has for me is that it doesn't have any unwinnable matchups or even any really bad matchups. Like almost every matchup is somewhere between sort of 45-55 and a 60-40, I'd say, out of decks you'd expect to see in a tournament. So because of that, it means that any game is losable, but also any game is winnable.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair assessment. And there's so many little combos that sometimes just work out on the fly. I found it a really interesting deck to play, and it's so much so I actually find Rain so interesting. I struggle now not to build Rain's decks whenever I do go to a new deck. Almost everything. As you guys probably much know, my love for Targ Rains, which will be a thing.
Yes, of course.
It will be.
Okay.
But yeah, guys. If you haven't tried Tyrell Rains, I would highly recommend giving it a go. I've had a lot of fun playing Tyrell Rains. Slightly different build from this, but the core reasons for running it are there still. Anything you want to add, Wamma?
No, thanks for having me on here. Thanks to Matt for joining us, asking a bunch of good questions that I wouldn't have thought of.
No, he's definitely got a different way of looking at the game. Probably, I don't know, maybe not in some bad way, but when it's the different metas from different parts of the world.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
And not trying to say negative, ours is better, but just different metas have different ways of looking things. Look at Australia about a year or so ago when every single tournament was won by Stark. Which,
I mean, in the UK, I think Lannister is nowhere near as big a force as it is in anywhere else in the world, but especially America.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a fair assessment. And obviously that obviously Lannister's big. That Targ became our big problem, so you have to look at a deck from Targ, and then obviously Targ's disappeared, so now you got to look at other options. But anyway, guys, thank you for watching. Normally we would do a game, but there's so many Tyrell Rains decks, so games on this channel already. I'm just going to link some of them because.
Yeah, and when the Norwich Regional videos go up on the White Walkers channel, we can cross-link them as well.
Definitely, we'll definitely get those on there. But there's quite a lot of videos, and especially a lot of them in my streams. I'm talking about what I'm thinking using the deck. Maybe not quite to the same skill as Mr. Wamma here, but still, almost as good, maybe.
I'm sure it's better.
No, it really isn't. But anyway, guys, thank you very much for watching, and as always, it has been a pleasure.